Oh, is it? I'm sorry. Yeah, I turned it on. And diabetes in particular, and how epigenetics can use your lifestyle to reverse your diabetes. You know, the experts are telling us that our genes are not our fate, but they're raw material. Did you know that sugar doesn't cause sugar diabetes? It's true. When you have diabetes, sugar in your diet is a problem because you cannot properly metabolize it and control it. But it does not cause diabetes. It's actually caused by our lifestyle turning on the genes for diabetes. So, is that bad news? Well, not really, because you can turn them off. So we're going to look at that. Actually, I had the privilege of doing some research right after I finished my medical training at Loma Linda while I was on the faculty there. And I did about 3 to 4 years of research in the Marshall Islands. This is a picture of the bay there. The Marshall Islands are actually an archipelago. Anyway, it's a sort of like a horseshoe-shaped bay. And they have almost 40% of the people in the Marshall Islands have diabetes. After World War II, when they did the survey, public health surveys of all the Micronesia, there was 3 diabetics in the Marshall Islands, and now it's almost 40%. What happened? Well, what happened was not their genes. The genes are the same. It's their lifestyle changes. I call this our compounding pharmacy. Do you see what's going on there? That's where we were teaching the ladies how to cook in a therapeutic way. Do you realize when you sit down to eat, that, remember that first statement I used in nutrition? I says it was from Hippocrates, let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food. Do you know that now with the science of epigenetics, we actually know that at the cellular level, this is true, that food turns genes on and off. In fact, when I read Genesis, and let's suppose I take it literal, it's funny, it's like the older we get, the more uncomfortable we are just taking Scripture the way it reads. But for a moment, just put your adulthood down, put back on your childhood, and just, what did the Bible say happened that caused Adam and Eve to die, to get sick and die? They ate something. Yeah, they ate something. Yeah, sin. But they ate something that they weren't supposed to eat. And so, would it be so overly simplistic to think that perhaps there was something, could there have been something in that food that actually triggered changes in their genes? Is that possible? Well, it's not only possible, it is, now we know, a fact. Now, what we don't know is whether there was something in the forbidden fruit that specifically caused this. But what I'm getting at is it's consistent with what science is showing us. By the way, why are they concerned about diabetes in the Marshall Islands? Do you know that what kills most people with diabetes? It is not high sugar. They die of heart disease. The majority of people that have diabetes die of heart disease and heart attack and stroke. So if you compare the average person, by the way, about 35 to 40% of Americans die from heart disease, even the ones that don't have diabetes. If your diabetes starts over age 45, you have almost 4 times the risk of death from what? From heart attack. If it starts under 45, you have 14 times the risk of dying from a heart attack. But look what happens to stroke. Whoa. 3 times the risk if it starts over 45, but if it starts under, you have almost 30 times the risk of having a stroke. So that's why we're concerned about diabetes in the Marshall Islands, because it is causing quite an epidemic of heart disease and stroke. Look at that picture. This is from National Geographic, no wait, not National Geographic, Scientific American. And it's looking at the obesity around the globe. Globesity, diabesity. These highest colors are over 60%. Over 60% of the population in over half of the world have obesity, overweight. And that leads to diabetes. Now, in our research that we did in the Marshall Islands, it was about $2 million of U.S.-funded research that we did there. And we were using lifestyle to see if we could reverse the epidemic. And here's what happened in the first 10 days of the first group. And I just use it because I have the graph handy. It's not because it's the only good results we had. This just happened to be the first group. And what happens here is there was a drop of about 75 milligrams per deciliter, about 75-point drop in their morning blood sticks, where we check their blood sugar from their finger. That's remarkable. We have people, I had someone say to me, I showed this graph in a medical conference one time, so what did you all do? Did you put them on an insulin pump, to control their insulin? I said, no, actually, the one person that was on insulin in this group, we had to take them off of their insulin because their blood sugars were going too low. So that's one example. Let me show you another one. This is CK. CK had retired, and as he was retiring, he thought, I should get a really good checkup from my doctor. So he got a good checkup, and his doctor did such a good job, it found that he had a problem with his heart. He had heart disease. Here's a simulation of an echocardiogram, where we use the ultrasound to look at the beating heart. And here's what the results had been in his study done in 2006. Says, after reviewing everything, we have recommended he undergo coronary angiography with intervention if indicated. What that means is, in plain language, he was expecting to get a stent. But CK didn't want to have a stent. I don't know if it was because he knew that about 1 out of 500 turns out very not good. About 1 out of 500 cases, you can actually have a case where the coronary artery is blown open from this stent, and then you have to be rushed to the emergency room, to operating room, and have an emergency surgery. I know someone that I had that happen to them in Loma Linda when I was there, and it can be very serious. Well, anyway, CK didn't want to have that. He wanted to make lifestyle changes. So he came to our lifestyle center that we have in Rocky Mount. My wife and I have been working there for years. That's where we use the CHIP program as part of the treatment program. It's an outpatient program. But since CK was a relative, we allowed him to stay in our home while he went through the program. And here's what the results were from the May 2008 results from his cardiologist that he had done in Virginia. The echo portion of the test was considered negative for ischemia. The patient has done well with lifestyle changes. The plan, he will continue with diet and exercise and aspirin. And I was talking to the cardiologist, Dr. Austin, and I said, so how many of these do you see? He says, well, I've never seen one. That's what he said. I have never seen one of these. Never seen a patient go from having ischemic heart disease, calling for a stent, and reverse it so that there was no evidence of ischemia and no need for anything except lifestyle and aspirin. Actually, if you do a careful search, you would find that the aspirin was contraindicated because he did not have a history of a heart attack. Technically, the only studies showing that aspirin is more help than harm is if you've actually had a heart attack. So, whenever I show those kind of examples, the change in blood sugar or the change in the heart disease, somebody in the audience always says, well, Dr. Kelly, I've just got bad genes. I've just got bad genes. I was born, my grandmother had it, my mother had it, and guess what? I've got it. Did you know that you don't just inherit genes from your parents? Most of us have inherited a taste for certain foods. Yeah. Or also, did you know that being a couch potato is inherited? You can inherit being a couch potato. I'm just kidding. That was a joke. Okay. Should have smiled. Anyway, in January 2010, there was an issue of Time magazine, and it was all about why your DNA isn't your what? Your destiny. And it was about the science of epigenetics. And it says the science of epigenetics reveals how the choices you make can change your genes and those of your children, those of your kids. Do you need to see me? Oh, sir? Oh, try to stay here. Oh, okay. I can't be moving around. Sorry, folks. I'll try. I get a little antsy. So, a little history here. This is an actual picture of Watson and Crick, who won the Nobel Prize for discovery of deoxyribonucleic acid, this double helix molecule. They were the ones to basically be able to prove that it was the molecule of inheritance. Now, you've seen pictures of this before. Do you know what this is? Every one of these little rungs in the ladder is called a base pair. Can you see these two right here? They're paired up and paired up. You'll need that here in a minute. So, Watson and Crick. And then this gentleman, Dr. Francis Collins, who's now director of the National Institutes of Health, did you know he's quite a guitar player, by the way? He came to our senior, when I was a medical student at Loma Linda, he was our special guest for our graduation at medical school. And he played his guitar and sang a song. Quite a fella. But anyway, his song was, what was it? It was I Did It My Way. But anyhow, he was in charge of the Human Genome Project, and about a decade ago, we sequenced the human genome. How many base pairs? 3 billion. 3 billion of those rungs in that ladder. Now, I don't know if you realize, but if you could count fast, if everybody in the room could count fast, do you realize we would still die before we could count to 3 billion? I mean, 3 billion is so huge, it's beyond, really, you can't imagine how big it is. And that's how many there are in the DNA in each cell in your body. And each cell, and it's in the nucleus, actually, not in the, and so it's in this tiny little part that you can't see without a microscope. And there's 3 billion of them. 25,000 genes. Thousands of variations, millions of variations. Most of these variations are not very much of a problem. We use them for DNA testing. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot, excuse me. So, this is one illustration of where you have one difference. Sickle cell disease and a normal red blood cell is caused by a single change or difference in the DNA sequence. Now, can you tell me what those are? I've had this picture up here before, so some of you remember. Those are little hedgehogs. And help me, Sally, it's not walnuts, it looks like English chestnuts. That's right. Have you ever seen English chestnut? It's kind of got those little spines. Anyway, they really do. Hedgehogs really do look a little bit like an English chestnut. Well, where I want that picture to remind us, gives me a pause to stop a minute, and I want you to think about, where did you come from? Where did those hedgehogs come from? Well, we came from mom's egg that was only partial, okay? There's only half of the DNA is in her egg, right? We need another half from dad's sperm. So when mom's egg and dad's sperm came together, they became a complete set of DNA. And then that cell, which is called a zygote, that cell was capable of becoming 2 cells. So that cell divided into 2 cells. Each one of those, in turn, divided And so pretty soon we had, what, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. And 9 months later, you were born. Well, or 8. Maybe a few of you, maybe 7. You know, you can't survive if you're born at about 6 months. That's pretty tough. A few rare ones. I think it's 20 weeks is like the maximum. So, 9 months, and there you were. So, I have a question for you. If every cell in your body has a copy of the same DNA because it came from that first cell, how then does it make such different tissues? Some cells make nose, some make toes, some make quills. Did you know you have all the DNA for a liver in your ear? Aren't you glad it turned off? Yeah, it's right. I'm glad it's not being expressed. So in common lingo, the genes for our liver in my ear, they're there, but they're turned off. In fact, the genes for a left ear are in my right ear. But those are turned off too. And I'm glad for that. So the point is, the 25,000 or so genes in every cell, the majority of them are actually turned off. So, what we've learned is that we don't actually inherit DNA. Well, that's not what we got from our parents. Here's Dr. Emma Whitelaw. She's an expert. Let her say it. What we inherit from our parents are chromosomes. And chromosomes are only 50% DNA. The other 50% is made up of protein molecules, and these proteins carry the epigenetic marks and information. So, turns out that here's a little schematic. This is a chromosome. You can kind of recognize the X shape. And it's made out of chromatin, and that's made out of DNA helix, and that has base pairs, and this methyl group can be put on there, or these are histones, the molecules that the proteins that the DNA is wrapped up on to organize it, and those have tails. Anyway, when these little marks are put on there, it can turn on or turn off the genes. And so we inherited genes from our parents, and when we got the genes, we got the switches with it, right? Makes perfect sense. So we started life with the gene switch position by what? What had set the switches in that first cell that you got from mom and dad? It wasn't you. Turns out that the switches are set by our parents. Let's look at this. Interesting study right here. Oh yeah, here's first the schematic. So here's the gene, and that's the epigenetics is the switch, right? Turns out that there's lots of switches. Oh, I keep moving out of the light. There's multi-way switches. In fact, I remember when I was first studying biochemistry, and there was only about 2% of all those 3 billion base pairs, only about 2% is for genes. 98% plus does not code genes. And you know what they called it? Some of you know this for a fact, but they called it junk DNA. It was considered to be unnecessary. You know what we now know? We know that about 90% of it is switches. And probably when we find out what the other 6 or 8% is, we're going to discover some more amazing things about the human genome. Okay, so I want to tell you now about 3 studies real quick. And I will be ready. I'll be finished at 6. And that is, first about a mouse. One of these mice on the picture here is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, actually. And it's called an agouti mouse. And it's so valuable because a lot of work went into putting genes into the mouse so that its babies, generation after generation, have the genes for human obesity, heart disease, diabetes, all those things that people are killing people, so we can study in animals. All right? Well, some researchers at Duke University who were working on epigenetics and switches thought, hey, this would be a really good mouse to do a test. It's got these bad genes in it. Suppose we could feed the mother a special diet to turn off the genes. And we could see what would happen in the babies. And so they did. They did a research. And when it was published in 1998, the first time it was published, it created amazing history. I mean, this is one of the biggest findings we've had in genetics for probably 50 years. And this is the actual picture. You can find this at their website, Duke's website. And this is the mother and the baby. And of course, as you can tell, it doesn't even look like, right? Because the genes that she has cause her fur to be sort of a dishwater blondish. But when you do the DNA testing, this mouse has the same genes. So think about this for a moment, by the way. Oops, sorry. Think about this for a minute. If we were to look at the DNA in these two mice and say, what DNA predicts this obesity and this diabetes, we would get mixed results, wouldn't we? Because over here, yes, those genes cause, but over here they're there and they don't cause it. And I'm telling you something here, very simple, but very profound. DNA testing looking for disease is having trouble in no small part because of this right here. It's not whether the gene is present, it's whether it's turned on. That's much more important for the phenotype. Okay, this is phenotypic characteristics. So anyway, DNA testing reveals that this mouse has the DNA, but the genes were turned off in utero. And they showed that the genes' effect were evident for 3 to 4 generations after the mother was fed this special diet. She was fed a high folate diet, by the way. If you read the research on this, very interesting. You can eat that by having a good vegetarian meal. How we eat can transmit effects to the 3rd and 4th generation of our descendants. That's biblical, isn't it? Okay, now let me turn to a rat study. This was published in 2008, about 10 years later than the other study. And here it says maternal high-fat diet and fetal programming. So here we have an ordinary laboratory rat, no special genes put in it. It's not worth thousands of dollars. And what they were doing is they're feeding this rat while she's pregnant. One group, they're feeding a high-fat diet. In another arm of the study, they're feeding a normal diet, okay? And some people always want to know, I really like the ones that are curious, it's about a 55% calories from fat. That's what they were feeding this mother. They were able to trace the effect of her diet on the gene expression in the brain of the baby. And they showed that chromosome 3, there was a gene that was turned on or up, causing the production of neurons. So this baby's brain was anatomically changed by the mother's diet. That's the first, I mean, that fact alone is kind of dramatic if you think about it. But these cells that were produced took up their place at the base of the brain. They're actually located in the hypothalamus. And so the baby whose mother was fed a high-fat diet had hormonally active cells working overtime in the base of the brain. And here's the kind of results that they produced in the adolescent. High blood lipids, so they had hypercholesterolemia, hyperlipidemia. Their doctor wanted to put them on a statin. They had a higher food intake. Whenever they visited McDonald's, they said, please, supersize me. They had a higher fat preference. If you gave them a choice, they would prefer the high-fat food. Interesting. That's what mama was fed when they were in the womb. They had an early puberty onset. They started being hormonally mature to have babies sooner. And they had a higher body weight. They were more overweight and obese. Do you know what the pediatricians said when they saw this profile? This is what we're seeing happening in the young people in America. This is the exact profile. In fact, the American Academy of Pediatrics recently updated their recommendations and said for pediatricians you should start tracking risk factors in overweight children at age 2, and you may need to start statin medications at age 8 if their cholesterol is too high. That's the wrong solution, friends. It's the wrong solution. This is Dr. Feinberg from Johns Hopkins, not too far away from here. They've got a center for epigenetics. I have great respect for this man based on one of his writings I've read. Here's one from Journal of American Medical Association in 2008. And he says, epigenetics is at the epicenter of modern medicine. He says this is not some small thing. This is actually the epicenter for medicine. And I want to show you why he's right. Here's a study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences by Dr. Ornish and some of his people, his colleagues. And this is in 30 men who had prostate cancer. And in this, 30 men had low-risk prostate cancer. They did not have surgery or radiation. They got a comprehensive lifestyle change program. Sort of like CK, who had that heart disease. He took a lifestyle change instead of a stent. And what they did was they donated serial prostate needle biopsies. So at the beginning of the 3 months, they took a needle and put into the prostate cancer and drew out a few of the cancer cells. And then after 3 months of the lifestyle intervention, they did it again and got a small amount of messenger RNA. And if you remember any of your biology, you know that messenger RNA is the way we can tell what genes are being expressed, because for a gene to be expressed, it has to have copies of messenger RNA made of it. Now this is called a heat map, and the way this works, let me explain it to you. There's on the left side is the pre-intervention baseline, and over here is after 3 months. There's one column, if you were to count this up, there's 30 columns, one for each man here, 30 men in the study, and one over here, another 30 columns, okay? And then each row is a different gene that was measured, okay, the messenger RNA. The color of each one of these intersections is dark if there's a lot of messenger RNA, or light if there's very little messenger RNA. So what this means is if you look at the left side, you see, I can see quite a bit more red and dark here. Then over here, it's more like green or light colored. I don't know if you can see that. Sorry for the distance, but I've got the numbers just anyway. Over 450 genes were turned on or up. I'm sorry, down. 50 genes turned on or up. 450 turned down, off or down, and about 50 that were turned up. The ones turned up were more or less genes that we understand fight cancer. So this, in 90 days of a lifestyle intervention, these 30 men had a change in gene expression of almost 500 genes in their prostate gland. And they were positive changes. Look what else happened at the same time. God, I have to show you this. This is from the same article. Their weight dropped, okay, so they lost some weight. Their blood pressure, what happened to that? Went down almost 10 points. What happened to their cholesterol? Dropped too. So here these guys were put on a cancer treatment program, but it was helping their blood pressure, their obesity, and their cholesterol. This is one of the wonderful things about God's simple methods. That when we follow the instruction, no matter what the problem that we're seeking to treat, it generally will help all the other problems that we may have as well. See, these men had high cholesterol, but that wasn't what they were concerned about. They were concerned about their cancer. However, their cholesterol improved at the same time. Sleep deprivation. I just want to hasten, let me just show you this, the bottom line. This, by the way, you can find online from the Surrey University in United Kingdom. But they found that a week of sleep deprivation would alter the function of 711 genes. So, what we now know is that diet changes gene expression. We know that exercise changes gene expression. We know that sleep or sleep deprivation causes change in gene expression. This is Dr. Girdle, who did that first research with the agouti mouse. Look what he says. Epigenetics is proving we have some responsibility for the integrity of our genome. Before, genes predetermined outcomes. Now, everything we do, everything we eat or smoke can affect our gene expression and that of future generations. Epigenetics introduces the concept of what? Free will into our idea of genetics. So this is not being introduced by philosophers. This is being introduced into our understanding by science itself. So if you look at health as an outcome, a phenotype that we all would like to have, right? Optimal health. And what causes it, you'll find that the DNA sequence that we inherited, the genes from mom and dad, may account for as much as 10%. Maybe not in, maybe, but somewhere close to 10%. Medical care, important as that is, medical care has been shown that it only affects and is about a 10% of the determinant of your health or disease. The environment, things like tsunami or things like floods, about 10%. Do you realize that 70%, a full 70% of the determinants of our health or lack of it is lifestyle, driven by the epigenome, okay? So what happens? If you change your diet and lifestyle, have we seen research that shows you that it will change your epigenome? Absolutely. Changes those epigenetic marks that switch the genes on and off. You change the epigenome, it changes the gene expression. You change gene expression, why it literally changes you. Changes the proteins in your body are determined by the gene switches, the ones turned on and off. You know, this verse right here has always been special to me personally because I think I shared earlier that this actually made a vegetarian out of me, reading the Bible, coming to accept it as God's word. And I read this, it said, "And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat." King James English, modern English, for food. And so I read that and I thought, all right, if God designed me and he designed my food, it makes perfect sense to me for me to follow his plan. And at least I ought to give it a good try. So I did. I became a vegetarian. And you know what? Something happened. I could tell in the very first year, this was in 1975, I used to have every year, my medical history was such that I would get strep throat, usually sometime during the winter, and but a good penicillin shot and I was good. So I kind of had gotten in the habit of this. I knew that somewhere during the winter I was going to get a real bad sore throat. Just seemed like it always happened. And I would go see the doctor, and they would do that little swab they do, and they'd say, okay, give me a shot or some pills, I'll be good. Do you know I've never had another strep throat in my entire life since 1975 when I became a vegetarian. Now that could be just coincidence, right? Well, it could be. But somehow you'll have a hard time convincing me of that because I had about 6 to 8 years of steady pattern that changed immediately. Did you know that modern medical science is validating that statement, that Genesis 1:29 statement? In fact, they studied it at Harvard. Let me show you. Harvard did a study. The Nurses' Health Study, about 85,000 nurses, and the Health Professional Follow-Up Study. That's what that stands for. That's doctors and dentists. I think this is all male, and this is male and female. What they found was that each daily serving of fruits and vegetables reduced the risk of coronary heart disease by 4%. Now, what's a daily serving? That's a serving that you eat every day. If you eat it only occasionally, it's not a daily serving. I'm just helping you understand. So that's what this is. The number of daily servings means that you eat that every day. So if I eat an apple every day, that's one daily serving, right? Okay, let me show you that. I like a picture's worth 1,000 words. their chart that they published in 2001, Annals of Internal Medicine, and you can see there's a definite effect. So how much does one daily serving of fruit or vegetable, how much did it reduce the risk? 4%. 4%. You can take it to the bank, my friends. It works. So I have a few minutes left over. If you have any questions, if not, you don't have to ask questions. If you don't, we will go for a walk. But if you do, I will be happy to take questions or comments about anything I've shared. Sir. Yes. Okay, let me repeat the question. He said that the study that I showed with the 30 men with prostate cancer showed that there was a correlation of the cancer and the cholesterol. And it is true that that study, I showed data showing that the cholesterol dropped significantly. However, I would point out one thing. And then the question was, would it be correct then to infer that elevated cholesterol could be a cancer risk? I think was your question. And so I love those questions. And stick with me as we parse it, because the fact is, that study did not show that there was a cause and effect between the high cholesterol and the cancer. It showed a association, that the men who had the cholesterol tended to have elevated cholesterol, and it responded just like the genes in their prostate cancer changed, so did their cholesterol. And this is one of the big dangers that we run into in interpreting science. That's why I'm trying to go through this slowly and help you understand it. We cannot say from that study that high cholesterol causes prostate cancer. There are other studies that do show that. So you are correct in your assumption or your whatever. But I do want to help you understand that it's one thing to show an association and another to show cause and effect. So this particular study did not prove cause and effect. It suggested it might be there. Other studies since then have shown that indeed, if you are a doctor and you have a patient come into you, a man with a high cholesterol, he is at increased risk for prostate cancer. Any other? Back in the back. I see ya. How much of a ripe banana? Well, if you have one ripe banana a day, that would be a one daily serving, right? So if you have, like me, 2 or sometimes 3, I'm just kidding. My wife and I, she might argue that it's more, and I would say less. Anyway, but yes, I believe one banana is considered one daily serving. Now, if you were asking about what I would recommend as nutrient intake, I would say, first off, and it's hard for me to say this because I love bananas, but I have to be honest and tell you there's no daily minimum. You can live a perfectly healthy life without any bananas. I'm sorry. I wish I didn't have to say that because I like them so much. I wish that you had to have them. But you don't. However, they are very good. They are potassium, right? You know that? They're fiber. They have, if I'm not mistaken, it's B6. Help me there, Sally. She's my nutritionist. But anyway, so there's many good things in a ripe banana that's good. But I'm sorry to say, you don't actually have to have any at all. You can get everything you need from other fruits and vegetables. Don't have to have bananas. Okay? Anybody else? Okay, thank you so much. Been a pleasure.
Oh, we have one more question.
Oh, I'm sorry.